Welcome to The Moms I Know with Sheila Walsh-Denton and Maria Anderson-Farner. Two moms on a mission to reclaim childhood and take you from surviving to thriving on your parenting journey. The Moms I Know is your go-to source for motivation, inspiration, and resources, and real conversation about motherhood and parenting with intention. Thank you for being a part of our community. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
The human capacity for burden is like bamboo, far more flexible than you'd ever believe at first glance. Jodi Picoult.
Hi, this is Sheila.
And this is Maria.
And we want to welcome you to The Moms I Know.
So today we want to talk about this idea of digging deeper. So we talked already about this changing paradigm and how we have to be flexible and adaptable like the willow. Well, the bamboo, we have to strengthen. And we know that this is so difficult, but we're going to be talking today about how we all have to dig deeper. I think that as we're dealing with, weeks 4 or 5 heading on into this global pandemic, we're all having to find inner strength that we never even realized that we did. And so I love this quote about that we have these reserves. We just have to really work at strengthening. So today we're going to hopefully give you some ideas to how to do the work.
Yeah, we have to, Maria and I want to show you, inspire you in a way to do the work. We want to, give you some ideas of what things that we have done in different subject matters that was learning. I really feel like this is actually one of my strengths, is where I would see, as well as you, Maria, but that where we're able to see learning in everything. Really, you're able to go for a walk and the whole time you are learning because you are observing. If you pick up, look under a rock, you look under a log, look under, go deeper into the plants or anything, you're going to find something that you have not seen before. And that's what we want to encourage, I guess that's a kind of a metaphor right now, is like going beyond and looking, into who you are as a parent, but finding some of those crevices, finding some of those things that maybe have not seen light in a long time. And so we want to shed light onto these. But that right there, the power of observation in homeschooling is huge. It's putting out a jar in your backyard and measuring the rainfall. It is looking to see what birds are being attracted to your backyard, to your front yard. Is there a difference between those? It's really paying attention to your environment. And right there, we have some science. Right there, we can do some counting. We have some math. Right there, we have language arts, because you can write, you can research and write about the birds or something like, something like that. You can do math if you decide to build a birdhouse for those birds that you are observing. So right there, that's all learning.
So you're really demonstrating that so beautifully, Sheila. And I'm chuckling because, we were talking about this whole idea of, how do we dig deeper? How do we find this? And one of the things that came up as homeschool consultants, we know we've sat with parents and we've seen that, yes, it's a struggle because people want answers. They want to know how to do it. And they want to, to have the magic schedule, the structure, the this, the that. And we can't tell you exactly how you're going to school your children at home. We can give you ideas. We can ask you questions. But ultimately, it is this dance, and it's us helping you clarify these goals, the values, the things that you want to grapple with. And I'm laughing because, you're talking about the powers of observation. I once had a parent say, "Oh, Maria, you could find educational value in a grain of rice." And I'm like, well, of course. I mean, look at how it's grown and where it's grown and how it's shipped. And of course, there's so many different things we can look at. But it's this whole concept of doing the work. And you've also talked about Dr. Shivali Sabari with The Conscious Parent. And you said, even in our book review of her work, it's like, yeah, but you'd be ready to do the work. And so we want to invite you to do the work. We know that it's going to be hard, but here, you just in that opening gave so many little gems of how people can look at things differently. And this power of observation is so huge. And so, first we kind of need to turn that magnifying glass on ourselves, do the inner work that we need to as parents. And then once we clarify that, then we can turn it outward. And I'm also thinking about, the families that might not have access to the backyard or to the hiking or to this and to that. My son just recently got back from Peru, and he was in a hostel for 3 weeks, basically in the hostel, but there was a roof deck and he was able to go up every day. And, we look at how we're deepening the observation of the sky, of weather, even if you have a window to look out, there's so many opportunities to create around that. And so, again, I think, now we can really head into even a few more examples of how we take this. And we talked in a previous episode about this concept of, taking the curriculum that is coming at you from teachers, if you're not homeschooling already, and it's coming from this outside source, and how do you take that and turn it into lessons that are going to really be relevant to your child. So let's come up with a couple of examples, I think, here.
Okay. So like I said, observation is a big one. The next one that I automatically go to is the reading aloud, is where a lot of, we want to have our children learn language, to hear literature. Both Maria and I are big believers in classic literature for the lessons learned and just for the absolute beautiful language. And so this is an opportunity for you to choose some books, some classics, to really to use that. And what I used to run a book club in Maria's classroom with another friend, and she would do the language arts part of it. But my favorite part was doing the social studies part of it. And so because I used to be a high school history teacher, and so we did a timeline in the classroom, and we would say, okay, when was the book read? And I remember I always loved asking the kids, what year do you think this book was written? What were the contextual clues? And so they would, we'd say, were there cars or were there not? What was the land like? What was the layout? And so that really was a springboard in social studies, geography. We always would pull down the map and look at, where are these stories taking place? What time of year it's taking place? Who is the author talking about it? Is it a nonfiction, fictional, or is it, fictional history, which is like my favorite genre of of story. And then that would be the learning right there. And it's so enjoyable. And I mean, that's just a plug also for we have a children's reading book list that is all about that. Another thing I kind of want to go back a little bit when you're talking about, conscious parenting. And one of the big things about that, it's the connection. It's looking at ourselves, getting away from the shoulds, really getting away. And that's one thing that I've heard parents say is like, well, they should be doing this. And it's just like letting that piece go and focusing on the connection and focusing on the play, because play is where walls get broken down, and it's where connections happen. I remember we did an episode on play, and I forget, there's something about like a brain synapses where you learn something through play and you understand the concept a lot quicker.
Right. And Linda McCrick, in our interview with Linda, we talked about that too, and how play is a child's way that they learn. And so, and then as adults, when we can allow ourselves to play, then, we can go back to that state of just pure learning. And so, again, family schooling, living and learning together, we're learning with our children. And of course, we have to figure out how we can time block and how we can get our work done and have our time for our kids and factor in, free play for the kids where they're just exploring on their own. But so you started with observation, which was great. And I love the way you jumped to the classic literature, because literature is a springboard for all sorts of other activities as well. So, we've got the beautiful vocabulary, we've got incredible character development. And then we've got these just classic timeless stories. But then I've seen so many times where children take those stories and then they create these activities out of them. They'll do, dioramas or setups in their home. I watch my grandsons, they take a story that they've heard and they can play with that for hours if they've got some very simple toys. And then I want to talk about experimentation, because you've talked about observation, but experimentation. And, your youngest child right now is doing that in so many different ways. And she's creating all of these things where you're experimenting with building projects or with substances. And so, I've seen some fun online science curriculum where there's all kinds of experiments, but you can do that on your own, and you can just get certain things out of the kitchen and let your kids experiment with what's going to happen. So with experimentation, there's this idea of asking the question, what do you think is going to happen when? Letting your children come up with hypotheses of what they think might happen, and then they can test them out. And so experimentation can happen in the kitchen, it can happen in the bathroom, it can happen in the living room, it can happen in the backyard, it can happen on walks if you have access to a creek or the beach or whatever. There's so much that can happen there with, what do you think would happen if? Let the children come up with their ideas and then test it out. So huge part of the scientific process right there.
Yeah, it's a scientific method, but and that's exactly, I would bring that in every year during homeschool, is just really come up with a question. What do you have? And you talked on, my youngest is really every week is coming up with a new kind of competition game, but it's been really fun because she has, 2 older siblings that are in high school, and the 5 of us are all playing together. And so she is teaching her high school, her siblings, that play at this level is important too. And I just got to share some of them, because last night's activity was blind drawing, where we all had to have a handkerchief, covered our eyes, and we had to draw a unicorn. And so she had to do that. We've also done airplane flying contest, where she marked up the whole hallway with measurements of feet down. And it was how far can it fly, as well as how many loop-de-loops. We had to do 2 different designs for 2 different paper airplanes. Her other one has been the collection of blocks. If you have a young child, you need blocks, because I have 2 kids in high school, and we kept the blocks, and we pulled them out when this all started. And weekly we are having kind of these little competitions that are, how high can you have 10 minutes to build the tallest structure. You have 10 minutes to build the most creative structure. Last night's was, we had to do a domino thing, so how many times did you have to touch it to keep going? And so it's just these little things that take, it's just been an hour every Wednesday, but it's just really been really fun, and it's play.
I love that. And when you're talking about these things, just what we've talked about right now. So you have language arts, you have math, you have science, you have art, you have music. We can pull all of these things in and look at these things differently. The physics that are involved with these things, the erosion if you're getting to a creek, all of these things. And then also, if you don't have access to some of these things, it's an opportunity for us as the adults to get creative. What can we be using for those blocks if we don't have those in the house right now and we can't afford to buy a beautiful set of wooden blocks? If you have access to a tree that has a branch that has fallen and there's somebody in the neighborhood who's willing to cut that up, or if your lumber yard is open and you could just go buy, 1 2x4, and I'm sure that the people that work there are happy to cut it into pieces right now. I think everybody is really working together. I was looking for something in terms of the yoga blocks, and I couldn't find my yoga blocks. Well, I got out 2, cans of canned tomatoes. They were going to work fine. And so, our children are masters of creativity. And so we can give these problems to them to solve as well. So we're working on creative thinking. We're working on problem solving. And so these are the things that a classroom is trying to simulate right now with activities or worksheets or assignments. So when we can flip this and say, okay, what do we want our children to learn? Or what is the objective here? Or even if you're looking at state standards, it's like we can do this in more creative ways. It's going to make us as we go through this struggle, as we dig deeper, as we strengthen, our core of bamboo right now, it's going to help us to become better people. And yes, it's hard. We're acknowledging it. I mean, I can't remember how many times I sat at the classroom table with a family and a child was struggling with this or a parent was struggling with this. And, we sometimes ended up in tears together, but we worked through it and we figured out how to come at this in a different way. I remember one time I was working with a family and the fourth grader was working with multiplication and was really struggling with her multiplication tables. And the kindergarten little sister was sitting on the floor playing with the teddy bear counters. And she was lining them up in rows of, rows and columns. And she looks up at one point and she says, "Oh, so 4 rows of 5 is 20. And, this is the 5-year-old, and the older sister had been really struggling with this memorization of these concepts. And her little sister showed her, do it with objects. And then it imprints on your brain in this visual way. And so, it's like just letting ourselves find that creativity and delight in that.
Yeah. And if we're to say, what's important, it's just, I think that what they're hearing from teachers, what parents are hearing is like the math skills. Right? They're hearing the math and the language arts. So for language arts, just read books on tape, just keep the language going, talking and having, giving journal prompts is a great time to journal. This is living history. This is a primary source document. They like photography, do a photo journal, right? I just saw a mom who's a photographer who's going into her daughter's class to teach a little bit of photojournalism. What a perfect time. I've been taking a lot of pictures during this time because it is a lot going on. But math is one. There are so many games for math, starting in the preschool ages all the way up through high school. You can start, the patterns and the, probability and stuff like that. But you have the Yahtzee, you have card games, gin, poker, sequence, like all those games. But I have to do, this is a great preschool one that I brought to a mom that I used to do with my kids, was I used to love skee ball. Do you know what skee ball is? Yeah. And so I would line up pots in our living room or in the hallway, and we'd have bean bags. And we would throw the beanbags, but each pot was a different point. And so they would have to add their points up, and so there you go. There's your math. It's just simple things like that makes fun. I don't know if I said, but Yahtzee, and then bringing that back 5 crowns. And I know I kind of jumped around, but language arts, I'm just thinking of one of my favorite game we've just started again is Quiddler. Have you ever heard of Quiddler? Mm-hmm. Loved Quiddler, Boggle. There's so many also language arts games.
And how do you think your children are going to remember these things when you've done this with creativity and fun, or when you've let them come at it from their own perspective? They're going to remember it better. It's not just memorization and then forgetting it. And so these are these core skills that we really want to encourage our children to strengthen. When you were talking about the documenting right now, this is going to be in the history books for forever, this global pandemic. And so I was listening to somebody talking about creating a time capsule. What are all of the things right now that we're going through? And then we also were talking about reading stories that really help encourage children to see that other people have struggled with these types of things. So Little House on the Prairie, The Long Winter, you're reading Patty Reed's Doll with your daughter. These things that, yes, people have made it through unbelievably challenging situations personally and as communities. And now we've got a global pandemic, and, we're going to make it through this. And yes, it's sad and it's hard and lives are going to be lost. But, for coming out the other side, we're all going to be strengthened through this process, and our children are having to adapt. My mother grew up in the Depression. She was a teenager during World War II. Her stories of that, my father's stories of that. I know you've talked about your parents as well. The lessons that were learned, the character that was developed. This is a time when we really want to help our children understand that. That yes, we're here for them, we're protecting them, we're going to make it through this, and to keep this as joyful as we can as we are faced with these challenges, but also that there's so much to be learned as we go through this. So that time capsule documentation could be so open-ended.
Yeah. And I was inspired by a friend who's doing that. And I feel like this is an opportunity for parents. If you have a skill, talk to your teacher. Maybe there's something that you can share with your child's class. Maybe there's some way that you can help so that you can be seen. You can offer a class. And if you want to go even bigger, outschool.com is a great website for homeschooling. It's ages from TK all the way through 18. It's a site specifically for homeschooling. But if you have a skill to offer, sign up to be a teacher. It's both as a parent, right, and or for your students.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things that we've talked about over the years, is that when we're passionate about something, then we can share that with our children in a much deeper way. And when there were times that our children, there was something that I wanted my children to learn that I was not gifted at or skilled at or passionate about, then I would find somebody who was. And so I think we've talked in previous episodes with, like outdoor survival skills. I found a guy who, he took the kids out into the woods and they did amazing things. I didn't have those skills. Now we're having to find those sources in different places. We're having to do more online work, but there's books out there, there's resources, and we can learn together and we can foster these things. But I love that concept of, volunteering. That's another thing that's really important at this time, is being a model for our children is how can we reach out and serve? When we're struggling, one of the best things to do is to reach out to others, to ask for the help that we need, but also to serve others. And so when we can find these ways, we can come together as communities. And certainly those are the beautiful stories that we're hearing around the globe. I've been so inspired by some of the music that has been coming together in this virtual way. And, children's choirs and groups of musicians. And so we can come together in these ways and really be the best that we can be as human beings.
Yeah, it's a lesson in humanity, and that's where we really have to look at our children, homeschooling and everything, crisis schooling, realize that there is a period of deschooling, and to enjoy the journey. We're in this together, but yet I also really understand that my experience is different from your experience. My experience is different from somebody who is not getting a paycheck right now. I am fortunate to be having a paycheck. And so, like you said, if you're able to step up. My daughter is making masks right now. It's like, so that's what we're doing. We're buying local. It's like, we're making sure we're supporting our local bookstores and local restaurants. We're buying local where we can. So I know Marie and I are both big advocates of supporting local economies. So remember that. And how can you help?
And our hearts go out to all of you that are struggling through this. We know it is hard. And I'm glad that you brought that up too, that, there is the whole range of human emotion around this. And we can't change what's happening. We can only change our attitude about how we react and respond to it. And our children are watching. And so, again, we're having to dig deep. We're having to really strengthen that core. So just take care. And we will be talking to you next time. We hope we've given you a few ideas to spark your creativity today.
And if you want more, you know where to find us.
But just take care.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today for the Moms I Know. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. To get the show notes and resources mentioned in today's episode, visit themomsiknow.com. For information on Maria's programs, visit thefutureoffamily.com. And for information on Sheila's programs, visit purplebeatfamily.com. Don't forget to subscribe and rate us on iTunes, and follow us on Instagram at The Moms I Know Podcast. Until next time, have a joyful family journey.